Hello and welcome to the Leaders in Cleantech podcast. I'm David Hunt, CEO of Hyperion Cleantech Group and your host for the podcast. This week I've got an interesting guest who is quite literally the original tree hugger, CEO and founder of the Tree Hugger platform, which many, if not all of you, will be familiar with. He's a serial entrepreneur, started in websites actually way back in the mid-90s. And in the last few years has launched a new company called the Carbonauts, which is helping corporate companies in particular, but helping companies to engage with their staff to enable them to go on a sustainability journey. So lots to cover. As ever, thanks very much for joining us. Please do, if you haven't already, subscribe on the YouTube channel and or in your podcast platform of choice. If you enjoy the episode, please share, please pass your comments, please keep up your suggestions as they come through. Many thanks. For now, enjoy the episode. Hey, Graham, it's great to have you on the Leaders in Cleantech podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Good stuff. I know it's an early start for you, but and lots to get through. So I always start the conversation with a little bit of a backstory on our guest. And yours is quite all entrepreneurs are interesting by definition, but yours is a really interesting one. You are the original tree hugger, amongst other things. So it'd be good to get a little bit of a flavor for the entrepreneurial side of your career, how you came to be doing what you're doing, obviously how you came to found Carbonauts, and then we can dig a little bit more into what that's all about. But firstly, just a little bit of the backstory, because you've been a TED Talk, you've been involved in lots of really exciting communication types of efforts to lead the sustainability charge. So let's get a little bit of what got you in this direction in the first place and some of the things you've done before Carbonauts.
Sounds great. Thanks. So I'm an undercover Canadian from near Montreal, and I studied product design and architecture. And in sort of 93, 94, I was at a school called Emily Carr in Vancouver, and they had the internet. And at that point, That was like text-based email. And one graphical web terminal in the library, and which was basically the web with pictures. And I saw that, and I was like, that is what I want to do. And so I rode my motorcycle down to Seattle the day after school ended and bunked in with my cousin Tish Hill, and we set about building a company to build websites. Wow. And that was in 1995. So I had one of the first very early internet companies. And we did good work and got Microsoft as a client, and grew it to 60 people and sold it in like 3 years. And so I was very fortunate, right place, right time, and so I made some money at an early age, and was very fortunate because I was able to be choosy about what I wanted to do. Yeah. And so through that sale, I sort of finagled my way to New York. In my travels there, I had sort of went, wow, people walk my speed here. I like this place. And so I had a real attraction to New York. And so I got to New York, and my parents sort of grew up with hippie parents in the backwoods of Quebec. And so I was into environmentalism. And a couple of books, Beak of the Finch just got me into science reading. And then I read Natural Capitalism, which really sort of blew my mind. And so from 2000 on, I've been focused on environmental stuff. And so I had an idea for a website at that point in 2000. It took me a few years. I worked on a plant-based air filter. And in 2004, I launched treehugger.com. Now, treehugger.com is a tongue-in-cheek name, and effectively, at that time, if any of your listeners were around, environmental media prior to that was just terrible. It was partisan, it was anti-business, it was not designed forward in any sense. And it just was, it really lacked something. And I saw this incredible green future out there that I could put together in my head, and I wanted to make it easy for others to see it and be part of it and get inspired, and instead of it being inspired by fear, be inspired by hope and get people really excited. And so we built Tree Hugger, and it was focused on still going strong. 19 years later, it's part of the IAC Meredith group, run by my friend Neil Vogel, and still going strong, like many, many billions of page views. And so we were the biggest green site on the web very quickly, and held on to that for a number of years, and then I ended up selling it to Discovery, who were terrific, and we worked for them. I worked for them for a number of years, and we're actually with the Carbonauts starting to do some work with them, which is full circle and really nice. And then so that was Tree Hugger, and after that I just got excited about small living. I was always have done a lot of media, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could just live this exactly as I would like to really illustrate a greener way of living. And so Tree Hugger had always talked about small living, and so basically I started this company called Life Edited, and the idea was that if you apply smart design technology and a little behavior change, that you can create a smaller life, and that'll save you money, that'll lower your footprint, and that ultimately a smaller life's a happier life. And so what that translated to were a bunch of sort of space, places to live that did more with less. And so I built some incredible apartments and an off-grid home. The apartments, I was on the cover of one of the Dwell Small Space issues. Did a couple in New York. So things like, the first one is 420 square feet, moving walls, stretching tables, Murphy beds folding out over couches. Everything, every room was multifunction. In fact, that place had one room and just would transform. So I could have 10 people over for dinner. I could have guests. I had a home office. It just, it sliced and it diced. So I did that one. It was very fun. And then I did another 350 square feet, even smaller. That's the one on the cover of Dwell. And I gave a TED Talk on the subject, which...
I was going to say that was the first TED Talk.
Yeah, so I have between the two of them, so I have one on small living. It's called like Living with Less or something like that. And then one on weekday vegetarianism. I think that was my first one. And that one's done very well also. So yeah, TED's incredible. It is such an interesting thing. Like I sort of realized at one point it would be like talking to 1,000 people a night for like decades kind of thing to get to those numbers. Like the internet is absolutely amazing. So yeah, those two have been very popular and still continue to go, which is cool. So that was part of Life Edited. But then ultimately Life Edited, I'm really glad we did some really cool projects, and I think helped push forward the idea of small living, which is great. I was in the minimalist documentary as well. But I realized that I didn't want. I knew I didn't want to be an architect, and ultimately realized I didn't want to be a real estate developer, so it wasn't a good fit. So I should have done some deeper thinking along the way, but I had some fun, and I think we did some good work. And so that brought me to a few years ago, where I started the Carbonauts. And basically, the Carbonauts, the idea. Would you like me to launch into that? Or?
Yeah, if you do a quick summary, because we'll dive much more into that. But if you give us an overview what that's all about.
So the Carbonauts was started 3 years ago, I guess in the sort of end of 2019. And we do sustainability engagement. We do workshops, live workshops for large corporations like Amazon and Chanel and AT&T and Toyota, etc.
Right.
And so we're basically in culture change. We help companies have a long way to go. The world has a long way to go in a short period of time. And if we're going to get there, you need everybody on board and rowing in the same direction. You need people, you need your staff to be climate literate and climate enthusiastic. And so we have great workshops and tools to help make that happen.
Right. It's an awesome challenge, I think, education that really helps people to make a difference. And generally, I came across both your TED Talks independently and before we started engaging around the podcast. Firstly, as again, I struggle, like most, to live more minimally and to not fill my life with stuff. And your first TED or the second TED Talk came to me that way. And again, like many people, I'm trying to live a less, not quite a vegan lifestyle, but certainly where there's less meat, less red meat, in particular, less processed foods. And again, during my research and for that, I came across the other TED Talk of yours. And both of those are again, ways that we as individuals can start to make an impact, and collectively, clearly that's where there's a large change, or I should say a culture shift that's possible within society.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about, so you're now addressing larger organizations or working through Carbonauts with I should say, webinars, training, and resources to enable companies to enable their staff to make a difference in their life. What types of webinars, what type of subject matter do those courses involve?
So we do both focused on their homes and then focused on at work, but we tend to start with focusing on their homes, and so we like to appeal to people's self-interest. We're in the behavior change game, which is a very difficult game. We're pretty good at it, so we got to be really, really smart. And so for most people, home is number one. And so if you want to get people climate literate and enthusiastic about climate, it's a great place to start because it appeals to their self-interest. And so we have courses of all kinds, trying to meet people where they are and appeal to both their heads but also their hearts. And they're not webinars per se, they're like live workshops. So it's cameras on, highly interactive, trying to make it about them and get them really engaged. So we try to help them understand the basic issues and then really inspire them to do something, and then make it very easy for them to take those actions. So we do a lot of research to make the next step for them very easy. We focus on stuff that your listeners will be very familiar with, but the big six is what we call it. So, your average person, when we talk about sustainability, they can't make the stuff up, but they talk about straws and they talk about packaging and stuff that we need to fix, but missing sort of the big picture, the big, powerful, muscular sort of approaches. And so we try to get people to understand what those big ones are and focus on those. And so those are switching to renewable energy, reducing miles driven and making electrifying as many of them as possible, moving to a plant-rich diet or more of a plant-rich diet, composting, reducing food waste, reducing and optimizing flying, buying high-quality offsets, and encouraging people to share so that they understand and share in a very tactful, non-preachy manner, positive and helpful, to help people understand that building social norms is critical. And so part of, you want to take as many of these actions I just laid out, but you also want to be sure to share about it such that we build the social norms, because that's ultimately our big theory of change, which is backed up by science, is basically if you can get to 25% of the population with something that I think intuitively people know is right, morally sort of correct, the right action to take, that's when the whole society will flip. And so we view our role as really finding the 5%. So, there are only about 5% that are really willing to do much. So we want to find them. We call them the change agents. Find them, educate them, inspire them, incent them to really get after it. And so we want to build some momentum, build the social norms such that we build it from 5% up to 25% when the whole thing flips. And then if you go up a level, if we can get a company, and that's why we're excited to work with the big companies that we work with, if we can help them transition, then if 25% of all companies also do that, that's when all the rest of the companies will come along. And so, companies are a really big part of this, and we're excited to work with them. But we're very focused on their staff, just getting them climate literate, climate enthusiastic, and that leads to eco-innovation at work. It's also great team building and great attraction and retention. So as you know, the youth are working for a values-focused company is really important to them, and so this is a great way to illustrate that your company cares. So that is the Carbonaut story.
It's a great story, and obviously Tree Hugger before that. I think one of the things that genuinely conflicts me, Graham, perhaps you can share some thoughts, because you've been doing this for quite some time. We clearly, as individuals, all have a part to play, and collectively we absolutely can make a difference, and this tipping point you refer to is important that we get there. There are, of course, arguments that so often companies and governments force the agenda onto the individual about what are you doing as an individual to mask the fact that there's corporations or us governments aren't doing as much as they could do. It's a little bit, of course, of a, I guess, with greenwashing, there are some companies who do this genuinely and some that don't. It's important that we do both. Clearly, education is fundamental to getting anything to change and behavior change. But how do you see the companies that you're engaged with, and how do you spot those who are genuinely with us all on this journey, as opposed to those who are, again, deflecting maybe some of their responsibilities?
So humans love to blame. Like ultimately we're fairly lazy. We'd love it to be someone else's problem. And so, of course it's borne out. Everyone points at anywhere else but towards themselves. So I don't think it's very, it's not very surprising. And we're focused really on the staff. So, if a company can somehow use this as greenwashing, don't even care that much, because really we're transforming the identities of their staff, which is ultimately going to help them transform. Or the staff will get tired of the company, and if they don't believe the company, they'll leave and they'll be somewhere else. But we'll have helped them sort of transform and just do more. So I don't know. We don't get too worried about it. We certainly don't feel like any of our clients are greenwashy in terms of what they're looking for. Our clients tend to be either mostly in sustainability, sometimes in HR, although I suspect more and more will be in HR. And so, most of the sustainability people, they're there for the reason. They're not there to sort of greenwash. They care about this stuff. So, we haven't gotten much of that. But we certainly, government wants to point at corporations, and corporations want to point at government, and individuals want to point at both of them, and then that's no surprise.
We all need to play our part, right? So what fascinates me actually is around, as you say, those big six, and I've been aware clearly of, being in sustainability for 10 and 15 years or more. I was aware of Tree Hugger, obviously, from those early days. But from your experiences, both at Tree Hugger and now at Carbonauts, which of those areas of big six do you find most traction with? Where are people most engaged broadly in some of the work that you're doing with Carbonauts, for example, out of those big six?
It's pretty individual, I would say. But the food thing is always interesting to people. I think just because do something you do 3 times a day kind of thing. I think there's often some energy around that, but it's sort of it tends to spread out, and it's highly dependent. That's what's tricky about this. Like, it's not like, do you live in an apartment? Do you live in a house? Like, those are very, like, what are the, like Canada, as an example, has a ton of hydro. And it's cheap. And so solar just doesn't pencil as well up there. And then, not as good solar gain as well. And so it is highly dependent on sort of where you live and personally what your situation is. And people in New York don't have cars often. People in LA all have cars, and so the EVs are sort of more of a discussion point here, and less in so it's I'd say it's highly personal. Flying as well, and that's what really makes it tricky. It is so different for different people. So like we probably most people that are our listeners, yourself, myself, like, we tend to our friends fly like multiple times a year kind of thing, but the average American flies once a year,
right?
And so it's hard to look outside of your bubble, but people have very different life situations, and so we just try to meet people where they are and really find the thing, and we've become a lot less perfectionistic over time.
Okay.
Like, we just want to find the thing that they are passionate about and get them moving along. And this is about identity building. And identity building can come from action. So you take the action for whatever reason, and then you become the kind of person that takes that kind of action.
Right.
And so getting people to take action is really critical, because it can create that identity. And once you have that identity, then it can lead to other things. We don't like cognitive dissonance. And so we want to be consistent, and so we just try to find people where they are, and onboard them and just help them move along their climate journey.
Well, how do you do that? It's an interesting point, actually. Say behavior change at all levels, from the individual to society, is always a challenge. And as you say, it's around execution, right? It's around actions being done, not just the inspiration. So how do you move people? How do you try to move people and the companies from engagement and inspiration through then to it becoming habit and becoming the norm, and then them sharing their experiences to their bubble and to their community, and to make this thing keep rolling? Are there any areas where you find that are either tricky to move past, or how do you take your clients, companies and their staff, from that first inspiration of, oh, that's interesting, through to making life changes?
Well, we're very focused on behavior change science, and so that is critical, and I'm only leaning further into that, and probably this year we'll hire a full-time person. So,
Okay.
so I would say there are lots of tricks. The big one is continuity, and the challenge here is just getting companies to really commit. Like we do summer workshops are 1 hour. They pack a punch.
Mm-hmm.
They're really great, and if you want true transformation, you probably need multiple. You need to come back and be reminded, and you need to start to really integrate it into your life. So continuity is critical, and so we are now do sort of year-long programs with companies.
Okay.
So there's a drumbeat of content that comes, and so you're constantly reminded. We try to make it about them. We try to make it a group thing. We try to have some friendly competition and some accountability. So we'll use, for some of our courses, we have our own version of the Berkeley Cool Climate Calculator.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll actually revisit. We'll have them run their footprint at the beginning, and then during the course, so we have some longer courses, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, they will input stuff. And so we can do a leaderboard and help people, so some sort of friendly competition and just get people on. But they're all different, right? Signing up for renewable energy happens once, might not change that for years.
Mm-hmm.
While as a plant-rich diet is a daily thing.
Yeah.
So you can fall off tomorrow. And so it's really varied. So I think the main thing is trying to get some continuity and trying to help them feel it both in their heads, get it, but also in their hearts, so that they have a transformation.
Yeah.
They have sort of a new identity. It's just that they know they are happy, to do the thing and to keep it going. But it's challenging.
It's challenging for people, for sure. I noticed on the website, obviously, you have a community. How does that work? Because that's always one thing which creating tribes and communities that are, inspiring all over again. You get into this community, these conversations, and then there's a bit of gamification, as you say, in terms of, positively challenging each other to do better. But how does the community work?
We work with a software called Circle,
mm-hmm.
and so I think the community is probably a number of components, but one of them is just the sort of sharing that happens within there. We also have AMAs, Ask Me Anythings, office hours like twice a week, so our clients can drop by and talk among a group of people. We have the newsletter, of course, and we're also we're high touch. So the leader, the facilitator, is a big part of this, and they're available to respond. And so we try to just keep the communication going in all sorts of ways, and keep new workshops coming so that people are engaged, and then we try to really get them to engage during the workshops. So that there's this real sense of that they're in it together, and that there are other people. And one of the challenges with environmentalism is statistically many people underestimate how many other people care. Yeah. They think that a lot less people care than they do. So it's really important to get people talking, because it helps you understand. I care about that too.
Right.
And that's the way to really get them engaged and really help their identities to form.
Yeah, the power of tribe is fundamentally important. Just going back, Graham, to yourself, you're clearly an early tech entrepreneur and sold a business successfully. Then a media entrepreneur to spend with Tree Hugger and obviously selling that. So, how do you keep inspired, and what have been the greatest challenges and rewards for you over the period of time that you've been an entrepreneur in this, well, from the tech startup through to now in the sustainability world?
Well, I think most entrepreneurs are just problem solvers, and I came from, 7 years of design, architecture and product design. And so it's just a design challenge. And I'm definitely like to ruminate and try to figure things out. So yeah, lots of different I'm nothing to something. So figuring out a business from nothing is very rewarding as it gets working. Culturally, my first company built websites, and it wasn't nothing too exciting about that. They were, but we had a real culture, a real family culture, and it was fantastic. And I'm still in touch with many of them. In fact, one of them, Matt Daniels, is that I worked with in '96. Right. Is on the team. It's on the Carbonauts team. So I like bring them back if I can. Meg O'Neill, editor at Tree Hugger, also on the team. Very big part of the Carbonauts, and so that's fun. Tree Hugger was very, very rewarding in a different way, because it was we created a community, a place that people were were so excited about. Like, finally they were able to find a place that got them, that was excited about this beautiful green future, and so there was a real excitement and connection, and you still feel it. It's amazing the difference between when I talk to someone who was there and knows Tree Hugger and who doesn't. Like, you just go to, at this point it's like Tree Hugger is one of thousands and thousands of sites. Don't sort of get it. But at that point, it just was really different. People were coming home all of a sudden, like, wow, this is it. I'm so excited. This is fantastic. So there's something very, very rewarding about that. And it was such a great business too, because it's unlimited content. Yeah. And so I could easily help someone get their cool project on the web and get them a whole bunch of attention, and it made us money. Yeah. So it was fantastic. It was a great job, and it was really fun to be the head of Tree Hugger for sure. I'd say the rewarding parts now for the Carbonauts is just seeing the light go on for people. Like, when you can really see the people sort of get it and start to make changes and be really excited about it. And moving from climate anxiety to climate optimism because they're taking action and doing stuff and really getting engaged. Yeah, like the sort of the testimonials and just the feel that you get from people just excited about they've been. It's tough to know what to do for normal people. Sure. Like, it's tough to know what to do if you're in the industry. And so I think a lot of people have the awareness is really high. And there's climate anxiety is real, but they don't know where to start. You sit down and you start researching this stuff, and it's complicated. There's so much information. There's so much disinformation, misinformation. Yep. Like, of course you're going to give up. And then you're just left with the stress. And so through our workshops, you can come to, we're trustable entities that have really thought this through. And so we help people categorize things and understand them, and then start to do something about it in a very accepting, non-judging kind of way. And so I think it's when you see people that you've really helped them, that's really rewarding. And so we're very excited as we see our companies, our clients really get momentum and start to make a real difference. That's really rewarding. Ultimately, this is about those people and about building this movement. It's not easy, but that's the way we're going to get there. It's literally person by person, and we're going to build those social norms until we get to 25%, and this whole thing's going to flip. Like, the the beauty of this is there is a beautiful green future that's here now. There's so much that we can do, and we just got to keep sort of plugging away, and it's all going to happen.
Yeah. I think you touched on a really important thing there, Graham, around there's so much information, a lot of disinformation, deliberate disinformation quite often is to, if you create, fear, uncertainty and doubt, then the easy thing to do is do nothing, right? Because there's almost like a tyranny of choice and a tyranny of opinion. And where do you get to the point where you actually do something, you're just overwhelmed? So having organizations like yours and places where people can go for some rational choices to be made, and for some kind of limitation to some extent of, let's just do some of these key things. Let's start with one thing, right? Let's start with something or one of the six, then move on to the others. We don't have to solve all of the world's problems in 1 week.
Yeah, no need to boil the ocean. Let's just get started. Let's find something that resonates with you, and let's get started. And once you get on the path, it just feels good, and it'll help pave the way for the other things.
Yeah. One thing, jumping back, Graham, to you as an individual and to as an entrepreneur, we have a lot of entrepreneurs who've been guests and who listen to the program. So a lot of successful companies at some point have an event. Quite often that's an acquisition. You've been through that, have been acquired by, obviously, Discovery from Tree Hugger, but you stayed there for some time. How did you deal with that on an individual level, from being the entrepreneur, the founder, the sort of the lead of the business, to then joining a much larger organization? Even if it's one that you feel clearly some affinity for, hopefully why the transaction happened, it can still be a big change to you personally.
Absolutely. It's a big one. I was very lucky. Discovery just treated me so well. I think they just sort of got me, and so they did make me into sort of corporate guy, and it was sort of lucky because they're a media company, and so I did tons of media, which is fun for me, and so they treated me very well. So I was very lucky, I would say. But that's a big transition, and one that would be hard for me to do. I probably, if I'm to sell another company at some point, I mean, generally, it depends how they set it up. But I probably got a year or two max, and that can be a long time. So like when I talk to friends or people that are like selling their companies and talking about earnouts or working for 3 years or something, I'm like, wow, you want to be careful about that, because it is not working for yourself. It's not being an entrepreneur, and you may not like it, and a year can be a very long time. So couple 2-3 years like that, it's a very long time. But I guess the first company, it wasn't great. It wasn't great for sure. I didn't last too long there. But Discovery was terrific. So I think it's just good to know what you're good at. And I'm a nothing to something guy. That's what I'm good at. I'm not a something to something bigger. And so it's important. I just I'm not a great manager. I don't have the patience and the political, the knowledge of political maneuvering and just, I'm an entrepreneur. I think entrepreneurs have a certain amount of ignorance and arrogance, and we think we know better. Yeah. And that's why you go and end up building things. Not a great thing in a big company. So there's not a great fit. Some people can do it for sure. Not me. Yeah.
Just think that level of self-awareness, because you're absolutely right. And I've got one or two friends who've been through and sold their businesses, or have gotten to the point where they've recognized actually they've built this thing, they've got to whatever it might be, 10, 15, 20 people. At that point, they're like, this isn't fun anymore. For me, it's not hitting my sweet spot as my skill set and all these kinds of things. And it becomes difficult because there's this, I think in all tech, and certainly in Cleantech, there's this kind of Elon Musk thing where you have to be able to build something from scratch to this global entity. You have to be able to see the thing through to an IPO or whatever the sort of the big number is. When the reality is we're all geared differently, right? And some people can do that for sure. Some people can take it through to the IPO and beyond. But going to your point, a lot of people are just, let's create something when nothing exists. But when something exists, then that kind of challenge disappears a little bit. Do you find that, and how do you have that level of self-awareness? Or have you always had that?
I guess I figured it out. I definitely, my first the web company, I remember we got to like 25, 30 people, and something really shifts at that point. And for me, yeah, they're just different skills. And so when you have a management layer, then it just becomes, it's just a different animal. Also remember it being an extremely frustrating period, because you're basically, your staff both don't want structure and do want structure at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're getting like competing messages from the same people. So it's wildly frustrating because, I mean, effectively you're growing. You've got to get structure. You've got to have a management layer. You've got to do all that. And, and they both want it and don't want it at the same time. And so it's a very difficult. And it's for me definitely less fun after. When you start to, just lots of blah, 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 management talk. It's not my thing. So I'm very clearly like an early stage guy. And I don't know, I'm a lot more mature now than I was then. And so maybe it'll be different. And I think, I think you can plan it. Like I with this one or future companies, I think if I was sort of given a lot of leeway and became like really product focused. Like I'm a designer and I really enjoy that. And so if you sort of gave me a small team and really focused on a part of the business or the product or something, it could be very rewarding. I don't know.
Yeah. It's good to have obviously the choices that you've created by the career that you've developed and the way that you've built things. Just looking at Carbonauts now, so what is the, not so much talking about exits, but generally what's the next stages for Carbonauts? Is there, what's your sort of global footprint like? There's obviously throughout the world, everybody wants to join and needs to join the sustainability challenges. What's the plan for the scaling and growing of Carbonauts?
Well, I think we're mostly B2B at this point, and we've got some great clients, and so we're just learning to grow within those companies. There should be, we have enough big companies that we should be able to be profitable and have enough business, and so we're just growing, and then and getting to profitability is a big one. I'm hoping we start to have some profitable months in the next like 3 to 6 months. That's a big one, and then. Figuring out how to scale. Like I've made some money. I'm fortunate. I don't really have to be doing this per se. So we are very mission based. And so I'm pretty much, I'd say, trying to figure out the business. So I've got a money making, sustainable business doing really good work. And then I want to step on it. So we'll probably raise some money in, I don't know, probably starting in 3-6 months. We'll start doing that, such that we can really step on it. I want this thing to really scale. And so that's, that's probably that's the big story.
What's the route of entry then for people who do want to engage if they're working with an organization? If they're listening to this podcast, they're going to have some interest in what you're all about, what we're all about. So how can they how can they encourage their company to get involved?
Well, we're generally big companies just because we need the numbers, because if you're going to find 5% needs to be something meaningful. So they're often big companies. So that's like our primary target. We are doing some stuff with smaller companies, and some of them can be really evolved. And if they're going to do a lot of the company, then that can be a fit. But if you just email me at graham@thecarbonauts.com, we're very easy to set up sort of pilot workshops and give it a taste and go from there. And I should mention, I guess we talked about B2B. We're also doing some B2C. Okay. And we're looking at some great partnerships with people like the National Wildlife Federation and JLL and others. And so we'll definitely also do some B2C, and I think that'll probably be something that grows. We like the B2B because we can have an influence on the company, and that can be powerful. But we want to make this stuff. We have some great stuff, so we want to be able to offer it to as many people as possible. So
Well, listen, it's great to see entrepreneurs like yourself that are really focused on, I should say, even beyond the point where you need to, but really have that sense of mission and purpose to drive this forward. Because going back to the point, education is so fundamental. Clearing through the noise and the chaff and the misinformation, getting people real information, and then most importantly, helping them to engage and to then take some actions themselves. So clearly, on the podcast episode page, we'll share various links to where they can find Carbonauts and yourself on LinkedIn, on Instagram, all these various places. Hopefully, they can engage. Thanks very much for your inspiring TED Talks, for the work that you've done with Tree Hugger and with Carbonauts. And it's been great to speak to you.
Thanks so much for the opportunity, and keep doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it, Graham. Thanks for your time.